Your security is under attack right now. I am 98% sure you are digitally vulnerable at this very moment. I'd like you to ask yourself something. What do you think are the top 3 security measures that keep you digitally secure? Antivirus, visiting only safe sites, changing your passwords on a regular basis. If you said any of these, you are not as secure as you would think. Google conducted the "no one can hack my mind" experiment. The article posed the question I just asked you to cybersecurity experts and average people. The two groups came up with 2 different answers, which raises the question, how can you defend against something if you don't even know what the threat looks like? By the end of this speech, you will have a better understanding of the threat actors, types of attack, and preventative measures. One of the most common questions asked is, who cares about hacking me? To better understand this, let's talk about the actors. They are broken into 3 categories: nation-states, cybercriminals, and hacktivists. Within those 3 categories, you can break them down into subcategories such as law enforcement, spies, oppressive regimes, hacking groups, ex-partners, colleagues, and even stalkers. So why would any of these entities want to hack me? Well, the first one being surveillance, whether that be permitted surveillance or non-permitted surveillance. Going into the non-permitted surveillance, that might be reconnaissance for a larger attack, blackmail, collateral damage, meaning that there was legal surveillance going on and you happen to get caught in the net, mass surveillance, whether done by oppressive or democratic governments, examples being China, known as the surveillance state, the 14 Eyes, you can look more into that, and even the United States with things like the ANT catalog and other things that I have linked in the description. Permitted surveillance is things such as user agreements with tech companies that allow for data mining. You've agreed to let them surveil you in exchange for using their platforms. These would be things like Microsoft and Apple. You also have things like Raspberry Pis, which are located around physical locations and mine data. So if you're in a mall, more than likely there are Raspberry Pis pinging your cell phone and checking what you're up to, so that way that they can better advertise in the future. The second reason, other than spying, is to make money. You can do this, other than the ones that I've already stated, by ransomware. You can steal sensitive information, botnets, CPU hijacking, which is essentially hijacking the computer processing power of a computer to use it to mine cryptocurrency and make money in that sense. These are some of the attacks that adversaries use, and I'll discuss them in more detail later on. Now that we have talked about the who and why, let's talk about the how. Exploits. It is exploiting the vulnerability or trust in your network security. I personally break this down into 3 categories. You have the attack category, the delivery category, and the other category. Things in the attack category would be things like malware. These would be rootkit attacks, different viruses, spyware, scareware, and browser hijacking. There are many more, but those are some common ones. Other forms of attacks would be backdoors and 0 days. These are the most dangerous of the attacks because there is no protection against them, hence their name 0 day, because only the attacker knows that there are these vulnerabilities existing. Then you have man-in-the-middle attacks, which is the goal of sitting in between you and your internet traffic. Essentially what happens is you send stuff out to the internet and somebody is snooping in between. This is why you've been told not to trust public Wi-Fi networks, because there could be somebody sitting in the middle seeing everything that you do. Getting into the delivery methods, you have things like bad USBs, which are also known as rubber duckies. You have OMG cables, Bash Bunny, and then you have the human element, which gets into the other factor, which is things like social engineering, which is the exploitation of the human element in a cybersecurity aspect. I have a very eye-opening video in the description if you want to follow up on that. You also have OSINT, which is open source intelligence, which is gathering of personal information from public information. And then you also have hardware vulnerabilities, which would be things like Huawei and why it's banned. Huawei is the Chinese company that does telecommunications. It's banned from the United States for this reason. Now let's talk about some preventatives. You have risk mitigation. Risk mitigation is essentially deciding whether or not you want functionality or security. And typically you want a balance of the two, because if you take security to the extreme, you essentially don't use any technology that solves your problem, but removes all your functionality, which is not feasible. So essentially find the plan that works for you. Preventatives are defense in depth. There is no one perfect security measure. As discussed, even antivirus is useless against a zero-day attack because it doesn't know that it exists. And with that, this concludes my speech.